Hi everybody, welcome to the Adversity to Advantage podcast, where we will be discussing with guests and participants how they have achieved success through face of many challenges. My name is Liz Hudson, ET Coordinator for Connect Housing, and I'm here today with
Matteo Dimaiozaffino, KBOP Employment Coordinator.
And our guest today is Michael Peoples, who is
Peer Mentor Coordinator for KBOP.
In today's episode, we will be discussing the benefits of education, training and employment on our emotional well-being and mental health. So let's dive straight in. Michael, can you give us an overview of what the challenges were that you faced and what the benefits are from meaningful employment for you now?
Oh gosh, where to start? Right. So the challenges I faced basically has been a lifelong battle with addiction and bad mental health. I've been diagnosed in recovery with CPTSD, which is something I didn't know I had, which is quite debilitating at times. And mixed in with this, I had an alcohol problem most of my life, drug problem, and also gambling problem. So I've had a really traumatic past, a really traumatic childhood. I grew up in Northern Ireland during the Civil War, and my mother was she had complex mental health problems, and she was a substance abuser most of her life. My father, in my formative years, was alcoholic, and we grew up in real poverty. And I experienced a lot of adversity as a child, a lot of sort of abuse and neglect and poverty, and it was just it left a what was an almost indelible legacy on my life as an adult. So I had a series of sort of traumatic events around 2009, 2010, going into 2011. My dad died following heart bypass surgery. He was in intensive care for quite a long period of time after that, dying. So, and then 7 months after that, my mother took her own life because she couldn't bear to be apart from him, basically. I got made redundant. I was in the civil service at the time. I got made redundant just at the same time, and my son was born. So sort of 4 life-changing events around that period of time within about 7 months. And even though I was working, I got a job following my career in the civil service. I got a job doing IT for a bank. My mental health just nosedived, and I had all this money, and it was just an awful job, and so much pressure, 14-hour days, and my addictions just spiraled because I had the means to fund them, and so my mental health nosedived for a period of time, and I ended up losing my job around 2014, and I had a suicide attempt, I think, around 2016 because my marriage had broken up. I'd lost my job. I'd lost everything. It just burned my life to the ground. And then I went, I had about 5 years in the wilderness, I call it. I was homeless for a while, and then I got into supported housing. But when I didn't have the constraints of a job or a marriage or any sort of responsibilities, and I didn't have any kind of therapeutic intervention, which I didn't, my addictions just spiraled completely out of control, culminating in a quite a serious suicide attempt in 2020. So I, at the time, had a worker who came into my life around 2019, 2020, and this support worker, I was with one service and then I got moved to another service. I don't know why or how that happened, but it just did, and it was like a gift from God, really, because this worker that I got had been in recovery herself, and through her tenacity and her care and her compassion and her empathy, I managed to get myself into recovery. I came into recovery on the 2nd of June 2021, and I threw myself heart and soul into the work at what was the Basement Recovery Project at that time, and then following that I did fellowship meetings, so I went to CA and NA and AA, and did the 12-step program. And through my support worker, I got introduced to KBOP's co-production forum, and I started taking part in some of the co-production activities, and that was incredibly life-changing for me because it got me a connection with people who were like me. And through the KBOP co-production forum, I also realised that I could contribute. You know, it gave me a lot of confidence because my confidence had just been completely shot to hell. I was just at the lowest I'd ever been, and I didn't believe that there was a way out. I didn't believe that there was a return back to any kind of semblance of normal life for me. But what I've found in recovery is that I've not just found a normal life, I've found the best life. I found the best version of myself. And through the KBOP co-production forum, I started taking part in little pieces of what would be classed as work. So there was an exercise on recruitment, and it sort of gave me an insight into how my lived experience of all the adversity I'd been through, how that could be used in a really positive way, you know, and people wanted to hear about my experience. And that was really life-affirming and life-changing. And then I got shown this job for this peer mentor coordinator, and once I saw the person spec and the criteria and stuff, I thought there's no way I could do this job, you know what I mean? But I did. I applied for it. I got lots of help and support from Matteo, who was amazing, and you know, getting this job has been it's been so good for me personally, spiritually, emotionally, and mentally. It's been so good for my recovery and my continued journey, and it's really something I'm really, really passionate about. You know, I have a real purpose in life. That's what my job gives me. You know, I've had far better paying jobs, and I've been miserable. So, you know, and for me, I wake up in the morning and I look forward to the day, and I literally didn't think that was possible.
You know, what's interesting for me is that you've clearly got such a determination, but also going back to your kind of younger years as well. You know, you made the effort to get yourself into employment. You know, probably right from you had that work ethic, if I'm right in saying so, right from word go. You know, you've kind of just explained that you had a good job and you might have been paid better in those circumstances. So you had that already instilled into you. Where do you think that came from? Do you think that came from peer groups as you were growing up, or from school, or actually from your parents?
I don't know. It was out of necessity. So the first job I ever had was working in a petrol station, and I did 55 hours a week for 70 quid.
Oh, God.
Wouldn't get away with that now.
And it wasn't a self-service. You had to go out and fill cars up, and then they were always doing these promotions. If you buy £10 worth of fuel, then you get a free car wash, so we had to wash the cars as well.
Oh, God.
You know, and it was yeah. But I think it was just out of necessity. Looking back, I didn't think I had a work ethic. I always wanted to work in the public sector, and that's what attracted me to the civil service. And when I moved to Leeds in 1998, I started right at the bottom in the civil service, and it was as an admin assistant. And I remember my starting salary; it was £7,117 a year, and that was in 1998, and that was before there was any sort of thing as a minimum wage or a living wage or anything like that. But throughout university, I worked at McDonald's back in Derry. I worked as a cleaner in a hospital. I worked at Jimmy's Hospital in Leeds. I was a kitchen porter once somewhere there as well. So yeah, I guess you could say that I've always worked.
I think that's the difference sometimes, isn't it? I mean, certainly with some of the people that we work with, it's kind of it's motivation, isn't it? And, you know, what do we do to make sure we can kind of keep people on that pathway when we're working with them into education and employment? And you've just mentioned that you did university as well, which is fantastic. You could have so easily gone the other way, couldn't you? It's kind of that balance, because life isn't linear, is it? It's, you know, you can sometimes you take 10 steps forward, but you can also take 10 steps back, it can be difficult, and that can be where you kind of fall down and think, this is no good, I can't do it.
And if you look at the social aspect of it and everything else, it just shows the value that, you know, what Michael's touched upon in terms of attending co-production and being part of the recruitment panels and things like that. Being around others, experiencing new scenarios, environments, it can be a motivator in itself. You know, even the wellbeing walks and different different group activities, there's so much power in that peer-to-peer work.
Yeah, there is.
It is, and it's about, seeing people who maybe are a little bit further ahead in their journey and getting inspiration from them. And that's what I try and do with certainly the peer mentor team, just inspire them. And it's not just about getting work. As Matteo says, it's about making it easy and making it sort of the transition. And that's where co-production and the peer mentor program comes in, because the peer mentor program, we support people between service and what the next stage of their independence journey is. Well, for the most of the current group of peer mentors, they all want to go into work and they all want to be support workers. I think once you've been through real challenges and real adversity, you have a natural desire to want to give back, because you go from feeling worthless and scum of the earth, and then you realise that actually you can have value, you can, be a good person, and it's incredibly rewarding, And that's what we want to show in the co-production and the wellbeing walk. It's about getting connection with people who are all on a similar journey. I think if you surround yourself with people that have higher standards than yourself, then you raise your standards. And likewise, conversely, if you surround yourself with people who have lower standards than you, then your standards inevitably will drop.
And I think that's right. And I think, certainly when you're kind of going through adolescence, that's a real biggie, isn't it? And from my point of view, I can remember getting mixed up with the wrong crowd of people. And I've been arrested twice. And yeah, for doing naughty things. And, you kind of get mixed up in that crowd of people. But it's having that tenacity to be able to pull yourself out. And I think from my point of view, it was because both my parents had a really good work ethic. They were very strict, and I think that's why I rebelled, climbing out of bedroom windows at 14 and drinking cider in the park. But I think because I'd had that grounding, it made it a bit easier for me. So I did go on, although I did really poorly at school, I went on to do college and then university and then masters. And I think when you get that motivation and when you start seeing results, I think that just motivates you even more, doesn't it? And I also think sometimes life, it's like pulling back an arrow. You have to come back sometimes before you can go forward. And I think if you've got that motivation already embedded in your kind of psyche, then that's half the battle. But obviously we work with a lot of people that haven't. So I think what you've gone back to is like those wellbeing walks, fantastic, because that's when you open up conversations naturally about where people are and what they want to do and what their ambitions were as kids and where they see themselves in 5 years. And I think certainly when I worked for social services, that was one of the things that we did. We did craft sessions for all, kind of things to get people involved, but that opened up conversations about where people were in life and where people saw themselves in, say, 5 years' time, but very naturally, rather than through kind of doing that in a formal process.
Yeah, and I think with motivation, I think it's about allowing someone to see past the monetary value of working. There's so many different aspects. I think of a young person I used to work with, supported into employment, and our initial conversations weren't even around work. It was around what his routine was, because his mental health wasn't great at all. And the initial steps we took to kind of get him in a better position, because he used to say to me, I've not got depression, I'm depressed. And then it makes sense when you kind of think about his routine of going to bed at 5 a.m, having gamed all night, waking up at 3 p.m, not leaving his flat, very isolated, not around anyone else. Now, for me there, it was around getting a step count in and setting a bedtime, as daft as it sounds, and all the rest of it. And the longer we proceeded with that, the more motivation he then had to have other discussions. And then we'd implement, let's get your CV together, let's see what you've got already, what's missing from your education. And I think sometimes by allowing someone to see themselves that actually my mental well-being's improving here, I'm feeling healthier, I'm not as groggy in the day because I've got a decent sleeping pattern and all the rest of it. The money's almost just that bonus then, once they've kind of realigned life a little bit. And also,
and it's like you say, sometimes it's like going back to basics, like you've just said, isn't it? Let's go back to the beginning and see what fundamentals we can change to move forward, definitely. And I think as well, it's kind of what you touched on there about it's not just about monetary, it's about a whole community, isn't it? It's about meeting new people, it's about gaining skills and knowledge in different fields. And
it just opens up your life completely, work. And for the participants that we work with, it's about creating opportunities which give them that fulfillment and give them that purpose. But it's about, if I think about my own journey, right, I did not believe that I could. I mean, if someone had shown me a couple of years ago that I'd be sat here now recording a podcast, I would have thought they were on drugs. Do you know what I mean? Because but it is possible, and that's what I want to say to people, and that's why I share my story so freely and readily, is because I was at the rock bottom, and if it is possible for me, I'm nothing special. If it's possible for me, then it's possible for them too. It's about inspiring them. It's about giving them two fundamental key components that they're lacking. A lot of them are lacking in their lives, and that's hope and confidence. The confidence that they can, that they are capable, that they have the ability. The people that we work with are incredible, and the life experience that they have cannot be taught and it cannot be bought. And and then it's about giving them hope that there's opportunities, that there's stuff out there, and that's what we try and do with this peer mentor program. Is we have all this wraparound support, we offer training, we have dedicated resource. Matteo spends some one-to-one time with the people. We work out a plan where they want to be in 6 to 12 months' time, and we do our damnedest to help them get there. You know what I mean? And it's about giving them that hope, that there is a better life and it's worth it. Because I know from my own personal experience, once you're in that, you feel absolutely stuck, and people talking at you and telling you it's possible, it's hard to believe, and it's hard to see the wood for the trees sometimes.
Yeah, and I remember, initial conversations with Michael, and his CV to look at was better than 99% of CVs I've ever seen in terms of the experience and the skills that he has in a range of areas. It was confidence, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was confidence and...
Your self-esteem as well, quite low.
It was low, yeah. Desperately low.
And that's what our initial conversations weren't around, right, we're going to get you a job, Michael. It was around how good he actually is.
Yeah.
The skill set and what you've done in the past sits above many people in terms of their work experience, but it was hard for you to see it at the time. You didn't need someone to tell you.
I thought that had all gone. I thought it wasn't worthwhile. I thought because the last decade ever would sort of define me. Do you know what I mean? Because the thing about addiction, and I just focus on this one bit, is the thing about addiction is that it's sort of self-perpetuating. It's a shame-based illness, so and it makes us behave even more shamefully, then reinforcing the belief that we are shameful, and then it goes on. Do you know what I mean? And that's why addiction's so toxic, and that's why getting out of that cycle is so important. And for me, like when I saw the application for the job, I didn't think, did I? I said,
no.
yeah.
Well, we had conversations about it, didn't we? And you were like, oh no, I'm not. And even that day when you were going for the interview, you were kind of terrified, weren't you?
No, I was nervous because I just knew that if I could get the job, it could be life changing, and it's turned out to be that.
Yeah, I think the bottom line is the own limitations we've got are our own limiting beliefs, aren't they? And I think sadly sometimes that's ingrained in us from childhood, isn't it? And society.
And yeah, I'd say society is a big one, and being kind of put in categories all your life and told this is what you are, and this is all you'll ever achieve, or people start to believe that. It becomes something that's ingrained in you, like you say.
And that's why, people who do struggle with addiction, that's why it's so important that they do recovery work, because what you realise in recovery is that you've got identification, because the world, the life, the society, the news, everything tells you that this illness that you've got, because it is an illness, is somehow your fault, it's shameful. And but once you get into recovery and once you start connecting with peers who you realise, gosh, I'm not alone. There are people who have reacted, and in 99% of the cases, addiction is a response to trauma.
Yeah, I think certainly in the last 10 years things have vastly improved around the concept of addiction and mental health and emotional well-being, hasn't it? And it's come to the forefront now, and actually it's seen as an illness, and actually not an illness that should be limiting, actually, that people can manage that,
Yeah.
and people can actually get over addiction, for example.
Yeah.
And if you're getting over addiction, then you're improving your mental health and your emotional well-being straight away.
Yeah, and I suppose there's a different light shown on people now managing mental health in work as opposed to, 20, 30 years ago. And
Sorry to interrupt, but when I was in the civil service, like, I couldn't admit I had a drink problem. No chance. Do you know
God,
what I mean?
no.
yeah,
That would have been disciplinary.
Yeah.
I could have lost my job.
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. And there's a fine line too in terms of, alluding back to Michael's story, my past experience too, and probably yours at times, Liz. There's a fine line between going into employment and your mental health improving and being in a toxic situation too, where it deteriorates. And that's why I think it's so important for, any work to be done with someone to help them move into employment is the right move for them.
Absolutely.
And I also think it's like you've just touched on a while ago about going back to basics, because you don't know what somebody's past experiences are. So you can't actually start from that point, can you? Because you need to know what their background is, what's got them to that point in life, and, what they see themselves as in terms of what limiting beliefs they've got. I mean, certainly from my point of view, I got told constantly in school that I was useless and would never amount to anything. But then when I went to college, just by chance, Leeds University were doing a study on how many people had entered into college with undiagnosed dyslexia. And we went down and I did the test, and lo and behold, really severe dyslexia and dyscalculia as well. So, but in the 80s, that wasn't even a thing, was it, in school? It wasn't even thought about. You were just thick.
Yeah.
So it's kind of going back to those basics with people. So understanding what their background was in school. Were they told that they were limiting? Were they told that they couldn't ever achieve anything? And if so, that becomes learnt behaviour and ingrained in somebody's brain.
And if you think of kind of participants that work alongside KBOP, many of which are adults, or senior adults even, and when you look at a time when, labels were put on people, like you just mentioned, kind of maybe however long ago.
Yeah.
These are people that have kind of lived through that period. So it becomes even harder sometimes to help someone to understand what they can still do after being put down forever.
Yeah.
And also, I think in terms of motivation, helping someone to see outside the box a little bit.
Be creative,
Yeah, just there's people I've worked with kind of in previous roles, especially where, they've driven forklift trucks and worked in warehouses for 25 years. They've since, had a real severe back injury or shoulder injury and feel like there's nothing that they can offer anymore. Literally had people say, I can't offer anything now. This has happened. That's all I know. And it's about allowing someone to see that there are alternatives. It's difficult, but kind of you've got to prompt that sometimes.
But you did exactly that, didn't you? You moved from one career to another.
Yeah. I feel like I don't know, I feel like there was divine forces at work with this one, but it was like something I wouldn't, like in my last life, it's like a job like this, I wouldn't have even looked at it, wouldn't have considered it, because I thought everything was IT based. I thought everything was money. You had to get as much money as possible, and that was the only purpose for work, Now, I absolutely love my job, I don't have much money, but I absolutely love my job. And because I spend so much time on my job, it doesn't feel like work. And, and I think everybody should have the opportunity to find something that's fulfilling. So when I'm talking about to people, and what I try and do to connect with people is to try and find what their passions are, what those things are when their eyes light up when they're talking, whether it's their kids, football, music, anything. Because I find that, if people have that spark of passion, it's possible to ignite that in their career as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you're right. It's kind of trying to motivate people to say, you can do anything you want, basically. The only person that's stopping you is you.
Yeah. And you've got to have your, reasonable boundaries that, you mentioned, going back to basics sometimes. That's what you've got to do to kind of take them next 10 strides.
Yeah, because we're all born the same, aren't we?
Yeah.
We don't have those limiting beliefs when we're born. It's like through the way we've been brought up, society, what we've experienced.
I mean, even through my working career, I always believed that I always was bullied at work. Every job I've had been bullied at. I've always drunk and medicated with various substances all through my life on a functional basis, but it would, like, as it got progressively worse, I started missing time off work and stuff. I always sort of seemed to attract those people in the office who would exploit vulnerable people and just make their lives miserable. So I was never happy, I was never fulfilled, but I was chasing this elusive, because we're sold this myth we're just bombarded with it all the time in advertisements, that money and material wealth that will
make you happy.
That will make you happy.
Yeah.
But it's nonsense,
and it's rubbish.
I look at kind of, I suppose, the role I do now, and in terms of growing up, we didn't have a lot of money. We had a very loving home, but, there were things we experienced too that, probably a normal household you wouldn't. And that was nothing to do with my mum either. But the big push for me was wanting to kind of help people move forward with life, and not just kind of help the adult in the house get that role, but think about the family too.
Yeah.
There were times, I remember a time my mum coming home and saying, "Oh, well, I've got this job," and I must have been 8 or 9, and I felt just sheer relief at the time. And I think it's not just about that individual person, but allowing them to see what's around them and the impact they can have on the people around them.
Yeah.
And by being that point of support. But it goes back to, I suppose, lived experience again, or having that desire to want to help others, was stemmed initially from what I'd experienced, what I'd felt. And that's just my soft spot these days. I just think a lot of the time, if I'm working one-to-one with someone, it's not just about them. I'm thinking, you've got 3 kids, you've got a home, how are you getting food in their bellies? How's that house getting warmed up? And for me, big thing around that work is inspiring someone by what's around them and allowing them to think, right, it's going to have this impact on my children. And, you think of mental health and you think of that person directly in front of you, but you've got children and young people experiencing that without even knowing it. And it took me to being about 22, 23 to realise kind of I had things I needed to sort out in my own head. And I still have episodes now where I'm struggling. But touch on what we've discussed already, it's a different world now. You're not looked at in a different way.
Not stigmatised as much.
You're supported through it. I can't speak highly enough of kind of the guys I work with.
My experience is very similar to yours. I had a really loving father, but a mother that was horrible to me. So I had that whole childhood of wondering what I'd done wrong.
Yeah.
And that kind of massively impacts on my own emotional well-being. And I've had episodes where I've suffered really badly with depression. And I think everybody, and I absolutely would argue this to the T, that everybody has some kind of mental health, emotional well-being issue at some point in their life. Everybody.
And even if it's not a diagnosed mental health problem, could just be experiencing like a wave of what that would feel like all the time. But I feel like
you can't live in this world and not.
No, you can't.
You're bombarded 24 hours a day with such negativity and such, and what I've realised in recovery and what I've realised, because I was really misanthropic when I was really ill and I hated the world and everybody in it, really nihilistic. And but what I've realised is there's a lot of good people in this world, and it gets lost in all the noise. And just to touch on what you said about helping people, so I spend my life now helping people, and it's not completely out of altruism that I do it. I help people because it feels amazing to help people.
Yeah, it absolutely does, yeah.
And so even outside work, I mentor people, in recovery and stuff. I give people lifts and and it feels amazing because when you get genuine gratitude from somebody, it feels like a blessing. And so for me, what I try and do is, like, there's so much need in this world for people to help each other. There's so many jobs where there's a help, capacity. There's crying out for support workers, for care, whatever it is, in the health service or in social care. They're crying out for caring people. So what better than to work caring for people, and helping people? And that's what I do, and it feels amazing. And you know, it feels amazing for me personally, and it also helps the people. And I think, you know, I saw this video once. I was watching this video about a near-death experience, and it says God talked to them and says, for every act of kindness, and he showed a stone getting dropped into this river, and for every act of kindness, it all ripples out, and love just ripples out into the world, you know. And so for me, for the peer mentor program and stuff, it's about, you know, giving people helping them redefine their trauma, helping them by redefining the trauma, redefining themselves, you know, using the worst aspects of their life in such a positive and constructive way, and helping other people, getting the riches that come from that, the spiritual, personal, mental, emotional riches that come from that. But like as you said as well, is also about, like, for me now, like when I was off, I was staying up playing GTA until 2-3 in the morning, you know, and it does, you know. And now, like, it gets to 10 o'clock at night and I'm starting to feel tired. Like I was watching this video last night and I was praising my eyes open at 10 o'clock. But that feels really good. And when it gets now past, if my son stays a weekend, gets past 11, I just can't cope. I have to go to my bed, you know. But I have that routine now, which is good in, you know, and it feels good. And I like getting up in the mornings, and it feels good, you know. And having that structure, that routine, that focus, that purpose, that connection, it's all good. But it's also about getting the right opportunities for people, giving them the stuff that nurtures them and what follows what they want to do.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's about having that gratitude as well. I mean, I'm grateful for everything that I've got every single morning, because, I mean, I'm so blessed that for me it could have gone either way, just like it could have gone for you, and I could have ended up in serious bother and could have been serving a custodial by now. Hopefully not. But do you know what I mean? It's just that fine line sometimes, isn't it? And it is.
But this is the thing, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
It's such a fine line between kind of whatever way the walk of life takes you. You know, you're kind of a couple of bad decisions away from.
Yeah, you are,
you know,
always.
Like us sat in here, and you're a couple. You know, you're a redundancy in 2 months with no pay away from being homeless or being in a situation.
Yeah.
So it's about seeing people in the right way, and like we said earlier, not putting people in boxes and saying that's what you are, you struggle with that, you know, in every way, shape or form. You think of alcohol, how many people drink, you know, every night or rely on it every weekend to binge drink and all the rest of it. But they'd look at someone taking drugs and kind of go, you know, they're a drug addict. Well, you know, you're addicted to alcohol.
It's exactly the same.
So it's about kind of seeing things from different perspectives and allowing people that are also managing things that are difficult to actually speak to someone that speaks to them in a way that, you know, isn't judging them for kind of what they've had to overcome or what they're managing at that time. And I think that's where you really kind of build that relationship. I was going to say rapport, but that's not the one. It's the relationship that you build and the trust that comes from that.
It's the trust, I think.
To really help someone see the benefits of other things. Because if you said to someone today, right, I know you're struggling with your mental health, but if we get you this job, then, you know, you'll be all right in a bit. There's no value in that. Whereas if you've been working together for 6 months and you pop into the coffee shop and you start to see, you know, have you ever thought about that and how you could feel about this, and perhaps even share your own story a little bit like you have today.
Yeah.
It opens up someone's eyes a little bit to think, you know what, that does add value, and there's so much more to employment than that pay packet at the end of the month. I think of myself, I think I'd be absolutely snookered without that routine of having a job and stuff.
And self-worth as well.
Self-worth, yeah. It's just...
That's a massive push, isn't it? And like you've just touched on, Michael, about, you know, giving back. It's so rewarding if you just change one person's life. It's so rewarding. I mean, I worked for social services for 12 years, and so working with people trying to change the ingrained behaviour and that cycle of deprivation, but just to change one person's life, were amazing, and it's an amazing feeling.
That's why we do what we do, I suppose. For me, there was... I think Michael was the first person I worked with when I moved into the role, and... I'd moved people into work and stuff before, but that was kind of just almost an expectation of the role type thing. But with Michael, it was completely different. And having spoken to him about what he wanted to do, completely different to what he wanted to do, and working alongside him to now kind of become what he has and doing what he's doing, you know, that gives me no better feeling. I think it almost becomes addictive in this line of work to be part of something like that.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, guys, thank you very much. Thank you, Michael, for coming along and telling your story. It's been fantastic. Thank you very much.
Voices in the post.
Okay, thanks, Matteo. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.